said yes.
All right.
Also,
Construction manager?
Okay, we're live.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, we're live.
We are
going
good.
to say you're gonna be here, I mean,
Okay.
we had the whole conversation.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping you didn't get lost or something.
Should we defer, do you think we should defer Livingston till later in the meeting if Dan Livingston's running late? Who knows?
Well, I don't think that Dan Livingston is.
He is
He is coming,
Yeah.
okay, good, okay. But if he's not here, Manoj is not here.
Then I feel like we should do RSR and Georgia Pickering first, maybe.
They don't look like they would mind.
What do you think? Do you guys want to?
All right,
Yeah,
so,
we're happy to,
I would say everybody's told to be here at 5:30. For the people that are here at 5:30, it's only right that we start. And we're going to start.
I'm the IT person.
I don't want to hold you up, okay? So good evening. I am Mayor Pam Pansevec, chairperson of the Glen Cove Industrial Development Agency and Local Economic Assistance Corporation. It is Tuesday, May 9th, and we are holding tonight's IDA LEAC board meeting in the second floor conference room of City Hall. The meeting is live streamed and recorded, and we have quite an impressive group of people here tonight. So let us call the meeting to order at 5:33 p.m. Will the secretary please call the roll?
Dave Jimenez.
Here.
John Fielding.
Present.
Grady Farnan.
Present.
Jim Capiello.
Here.
Vice Chair Hartley.
Here.
And Chairperson Pansenbeck.
I'm here as well.
Tom Hopkey regrets he had a work emergency. He could not make it.
I make a motion to approve the minutes of the IDA LEAC meeting held April 11th, 2023, and ask for a second.
Second.
Motion seconded by Vince Hartley. Are there any questions? Will the secretary please poll the board?
Dave Jimenez.
Aye.
John Fielding.
Aye.
Grady Farnan.
Aye.
Jim Capiello.
Aye.
Vice Chair Hartley.
Aye.
And Chairperson Pansenbeck.
I vote aye. Motion carried. Will Ann Fangman please provide the members with her executive director's report?
Chairperson, respectfully, I'm going to defer the executive director's report till the end of the meeting
Okay,
and suggest that we also defer the unfinished business matters to the end of the meeting and do new business first.
And for the financial report.
We are actually not going to have a financial report tonight. Oh, okay, so maybe we will.
Well, the financial report that was given at the April 11th meeting was the most current.
Correct,
is what she
and
said.
I mean, the only other financial update is that we are almost complete with finalizing our audited financial statements and Paris reporting.
so.
Should be done within the next couple of days.
Back to new business.
Guess we'll go back to new
So we're
business,
going back to the original way,
You
So
mean to
Ann
unfinished
Fangman,
business.
right? We'll
Well,
go
in
we'll go to
fact-
unfinished business.
Go back to unfinished business.
what about the executive director's report?
That we're gonna defer to the end of the meeting.
Okay, okay. Will Ann Endermillan please provide the members with an update on unfinished business matters?
Okay, well, I think we have the villas at Glen Cove, 135 Glen Cove Avenue here tonight, requesting consent to transfer equity interest. Since I see Daniel Livingston with us, and I believe Manoj as well, I would like to actually let them have an opportunity to present their new proposed equity structure with us. My understanding is you have now taken back all the previous consent requests that the board has reviewed over the last year or so, and have a new structure that you would like the board to consider tonight. So, Millen, unless you want to add anything in that respect, I let them give us an introduction to all that.
I think not. We've had several updates on this, and there have been some fits and starts and some defaults actually. But we understand that this new structure may solve all problems. Can you
Yes.
serve?
Yes, I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, so my name is Dan Deegan with the law firm Portelli Deegan Toronto, Uniondale, New York, longtime Glen Cove local. So I also have with me today with Dan Livingston, who's very well known to this board, and we also have Manoj Narang, who is a partner in the project and has been, and is also known to this board. As
We have Akash.
And I'm sorry, I don't think we met, but
Okay.
so this board is well aware of the odyssey that this project has gone through over 10+ years in order to get to where it is, which is right now. It has been approved by this IDA, it has building permits, and it's started construction in to date, in less than full-throated way, it started construction, but we're looking to try and change that as of this meeting. This board has previously, approved and has gotten to know the background of Manoj, and he has local property here. He has a construction company himself, and is a very successful man. We've provided financial statements to the board with regard to him. And as I said, right now, as we sit here today, this board has approved him to be a 43.9% owner in the project. What's happening now is that what we're proposing to this board is that Manoj be moved up to a 90.5%, so that he really is the significant main owner. Dan Livingston would remain through an entity, a 9.5% entity, interest owner in the property and in the project, but really Manoj would be the main driver behind that. He has a track record of many construction projects, but he would be looking to bring in a construction manager and general contractor, ultimately to actually build this building. Keith Lanning, who this board is well familiar with, has been with the Livingston organization for over 10 years and has been very involved in the day-to-day of this project, would be retained by Mr. Manoj to remain on the site and be a day-to-day contact with this IDA board, with the city building department, et cetera, and to generally be available and as part of this project going forward. So there's that continuity that would take place there. As I say, it will be a third party, hopefully a very well-known, substantial construction general contractor and construction manager. We have been in contact with a company called RWAD, which is right now looking like could be the preferred contractor, but we're not prepared to fully announce that that's who we're selecting because it's a competitive process. But whoever the ultimate company will be is going to be a company that obviously has to have the wherewithal to. It's a very substantial investment that has to be made. There'll have to be financing involved, so there's going to be a lot of checks and balances to make sure that that contractor is a level of expertise and track record that will be able to actually get this job and make it a reality. I think there had been previous issues with regard to mechanics liens against the property, and I know the IDA has been involved in relatively some litigation. As part of this transaction, all of those obligations would be addressed, and the litigation would go away, and the mechanics lien would go away and be paid off. So any of those lingering issues. Well, so in terms of the actual structure, as I said, I guess that ultimately Manoj's entity is also branded Nair. Is that what you're saying to mention?
Right.
Yeah.
It's not just Manoj.
Not just Manoj, right? Veranda, right upstream. So
Millen, as part of our resolution for all this, I believe we're going to be performing credit checks and background checks on the individuals that are listed in the board members' org chart.
Right, we've already submitted the forms, I think, to Dan for each of the individuals and entities on the org chart. We're still working out the mechanics with Castle Branch, but once we get those resolved.
Camille's going to need to be involved with
I
all
have to
this.
submit those.
Right. So the resolution, if approved, would be subject to background checks on each of the individuals.
And I believe the tax arrears were paid as of yesterday. So that was a significant
And
positive.
the mechanics lien litigation, there was a motion for default judgment because it was not moving forward. That is, apparently there's been a partial payment. So the motion for default judgment has been withdrawn. So while the mechanics lien litigation is still outstanding, nothing procedurally is happening. And Dan, do you have a feel for when, if it's approved tonight, what the timing would be?
yeah, so my partner Dan Dornfeld indicates that there's going to be a meeting next week with the principals of the the debtor, the creditor, and there's gonna be a payment plan that's worked out, but they are gonna be paid in full, and they've already obviously indicated their cooperation with the plan to accept that they've withdrawn their motion, and it's just a matter of putting the money on the table at this point, which really, we need this IDA board's consent in order for that all to start flowing and take place, and for the construction to start, full board.
Just keep in mind the background credit checks may just take a little bit of time, but we're hoping that we get the process going with Castle Branch. Get that taken care of. That's it.
That's it for me. I mean, as I say, we have
Let's go
Dan
somewhere.
Livingston and principals are here, so if there's any questions, we're happy to answer.
Do the members have any further questions about these matters?
So just to clarify, Dan, all I guess, litigation and suits and so forth against Mr. Livingston are all finished, correct?
Yes, and against the project, and they also named the IDA because it had an interest in the property. And they're not finished, but they will be finished as part of this transaction.
Okay.
Yeah, they will be addressed.
Thanks.
So do the members have any further questions? That's it. If there are no further questions, let's move on to resolution 7A. I make a motion to adopt IDA resolution 7A. 7A, resolution of the Glen Cove Industrial Development Agency taking official action toward and approving a consent under the straight lease documents for certain projects for the Glen Cove Villa LLC, successor by merger to 135 Glen Cove Avenue Court. Are there any questions on resolution 7A? If no questions, may I have a second to adopt IDA resolution 7A?
Second.
Motion seconded by Grady Farnham. Will the secretary please poll the board?
Dave Jimenez.
Aye.
John Fielding.
Aye.
Grady Farnham.
Aye.
Jim Capiello.
Aye.
And Vice Chair Hartley.
I vote aye.
And Chairperson Panzerbeck.
I vote aye. Motion carried. And at this time, I want to thank the Livingston representatives for joining us this evening. And that's it. Sarah, you may go.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
This
Thank
project will be a jewel for Glen Cove for sure.
We know.
Thank you.
We know. Thank you. We wish you much success. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's nice to meet you. Thank you.
The amendment documents, President, moving forward.
All right, so now we're gonna go back to,
Should we go back to the UTEP?
should we go back to the executive director's report or new business, Ann? What do you prefer?
I guess let's just finish out the unfinished business, which is the UTEP updates, Uniform Tax Exemption Policy. So as you might recall, we had an ad hoc committee take a look at our existing policy as we were directed by the New York State Comptroller's Office. We've been working on an updated UTEP. We shared that updated UTEP with the board members. We had some good conversation. I believe some additional revisions came out of it as a result of that conversation. Have we circulated the revised UTEP to the board members? I believe we did.
I believe so.
Yeah, so now we're at the point of notifying the affected tax jurisdictions as to what we plan to do. And I believe this board, in the sake of transparency, would like to hold a public hearing on those proposed UTEP amendments. So the thought was that we would potentially hold that public hearing likely in early July.
Okay.
Just to give it its proper time and place with some of the other matters going on. The other matters that we have going on really wouldn't be affected by our current UTEP, and Millen will correct me if I'm wrong. So the matter, before us with Georgia Green and otherwise, the PUD amendment referral really doesn't have to do with this UTEP amendment. So I think if we hold off till early July for the public hearing and look to adopt it in July, we should probably be okay if the board members feel comfortable with that. Otherwise, we could look to do it in June. It might just get a little bit tight with scheduling.
Just the one thing, in early July, I mean, that's the heaviest time period for vacations. You know, so
Yeah,
just-
we definitely would avoid that 4th of July week and all of that.
I think we also want to avoid August more than anything.
Exactly, yeah, I think that we certainly want to do this by the end of June or in July. So that's the current plan. Do any of the board members have any other comment or questions on that? Well, you're not required to attend the public hearing, but we'd like to have you there. If you're able to attend, would be great. Okay, so we'll keep you informed as that progresses. Now I think we can move on to the new business. Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna move on to new business. Number 1, application for financial assistance, Garvey's Point Block F, Affordable Housing Development. 2, RXR PUD 2023 Amendment, Property Transfer, LEAC Tungsten Lower C. 3, RXR Request to Transfer Block F. So, who's going to?
I would start. So, for the record, Dan Deegan with the law firm Porcelli Deegan Strand, Uniondale, New York. I also have with me today on behalf of Georgia Green, we have Dave Gallo and Matt Ardito over here in the corner. You're going to hear from the RXR folks and their attorneys afterwards, but I'm just here to speak on the first matter, which is the application for financial assistance for Georgia Green. Georgia Green is well known to this board. They're the developers of the Site G, Garvey's Point Site G, affordable housing rental project that's so far been very successful. And I think they've been fully vetted by this board, and hopefully this board would agree that they've lived up to their reputation in terms of delivering the product down there that they've promised this board they would. So this is another opportunity for affordable housing with a twist. This is the Site F project, piece of property, which is 2.3 acres on the west side of Dixon Street. It's vacant now. It's currently owned by RXR. We would be acquiring the property from RXR in order to build 4 sale affordable units, which is kind of a rarity in New York State. There's a new program that's been offered to New York State to developers to try and make this type of product available. It would be geared towards individuals making 80% of AMI. And, as I said, they would be purchasing the property from RXR with this board's assistance. They would be investing about $30 million worth of construction into the site in order to deliver these units. We'd be looking for a sales tax exemption and mortgage recording tax exemption, a partial mortgage recording tax exemption on the financing and on the materials for the sales tax. The pilot is already in place under the master tax agreement that affects all of the properties down at the waterfront. We're working with with the IDA and ultimately with the assessor to determine what that pilot might look like in terms of how it's going to whether it could be fixed or not. But right now, what's provided for in the UTEP is that it's what taxes would otherwise be. So these units will ultimately have restrictions on them that will determine what they could be resold for, who can own them, et cetera. So that obviously affects what the taxes, the value of what the buildings would be, and in turn what the taxes would be on that. So that's something we're still exploring with the IDA through its consultant. But and as I say, Dave and Matt can speak more eloquently about the program itself. But it is a new program that New York State has come up with in order to encourage this type of for sale ownership housing affordable, and it's makes equity available for a project like this that might otherwise not be able to pencil out at the sales prices that these units ultimately would be offered at. So I don't know if you want to speak, Dave, any more about, as I say, you guys know Georgia already, in terms of what the design might look like or what the buildings are going to entail.
I mean, I'll make it brief. Good evening, good to see everybody. First, I'll just begin with saying we're very excited about the completion of Block G. We had the lottery last week, and a lot of people are being interviewed and submitting documentation, and we're super excited to bring that to completion with all of your help and assistance and with the teamwork of RXR. About a year ago, the state of New York came out with the Affordable Housing Homeownership Opportunity Program. They allocated a sizable amount of money to find ways to invest in affordable housing to give people home ownership and equity. This is likely the first one to ever get done in the state of New York. We know that we're working with the HCR team, and it's us and a few others, and we think that we can be the first. And it would be extremely exciting to just continue to invest in the city of Glen Cove, but also to have people with mixed incomes available for home ownership down in Garvey's Point. It's 56 units, a mix of 1s, 2s, and 3 bedrooms. As Dan mentioned, 80% AMI. We started planning with the assistance of RXR and our architect, the site amenities, which will be very similar to the site amenities that we have at Block G, but a fitness room, an area for people to, Joe and I were joking earlier today about the lifestyles today, many people working from home, so having access to a room, a community room where people can meet, congregate, and then also work. And then we're also looking at doing a rooftop deck for people to enjoy and hopefully catch some more views. So that's the project.
Anybody have any questions?
I would comment, this is a preliminary resolution authorizing really just the start of due diligence. We've already reached out to the various consultants that would need to be engaged and have some pending agreements with them. So the seeker's already taken care of, because the planning board did that long ago, so that would be easy. There would be a public hearing, because the financial assistance is over $100,000. But again, as Dan mentioned, there's no pilot being asked for or offered, because it's already in place in the master tax rules. This is sales tax and mortgage tax only. If the timing is right, I think that this might be ready to come back to you by the June meeting, but we'll have to see when the June meeting is and how quickly we can get all of the other ducks lined up.
Okay. Does anybody have any further questions? If there are no further questions, let's move on to resolution 7B. Is this out of order? Resolution 7B. Resolution taking preliminary action toward the granting of, is that the resolution, or, because this, my script is out of order?
You can go to this resolution now.
Okay. Toward the granting of financial assistance for Garvey's LLC and its affiliates, Georgia Green Ventures LLC, and/or its other affiliates in connection with a certain project of the Glen Cove Industrial Development Agency, and authorizing certain action with respect to such transaction at Block F. So are there any questions on 7B? If there are no questions, may I have a second to adopt IDA Resolution 7B?
Second.
Motion seconded by Vince Hartley. Will the secretary please poll the board?
Dave Jimenez,
What aye?
John Fielding,
Aye.
Brady Farnan,
Aye.
Jim Capiello,
Aye.
Vice Chair Hartley,
I vote aye.
and Chairperson Hansenbeck.
I vote aye. Motion carried. And I think now we'll go back to Ann's Executive Director's report.
Well, I think what we're gonna do next is move on to RXR PUD 2023 amendment, under which we'll also talk about the property transfer of Lee Tungsten Lower C.
Awesome.
And I would actually ask, if you are gonna speak, if you could actually come up to the table, and Camille, if we could get this on live stream, that would be great. Thank you. And thank you, Dan, Dave, thank you.
Joe.
If you could just take one of these and pass it over. You can.
Joe, do you want me to stay for this?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board, Joe Graziosi, Executive Vice President of Residential Construction and Development for RXR Realty. And I have to say, because Dan did, a local homegrown Glen Cove guy. And I was sitting there listening to the last two conversations. It's been almost 2.5 years since I've had the opportunity and pleasure to come in front of this board. So there's a bit of a story here. And I always feel it's important that when I do have the opportunity to be before this board, that I actually tell you what's gone on since the last time that I've seen you and the impacts that we've made in this community. So before I do that, Peter, is there anything that you'd like to?
No, I mean,
To
the request is out there for consent, two consent matters, and I think we're discussing the first one right now, which is asking the IDA board for the consent to proceed to the planning board for certain changes to the PUD, which was most recently amended last year.
Great. So because there's no technology in this room, I'll use page numbers on this flip book, and please, by all means, in any way,
Can you
stop
slide
me.
down?
I'm sorry,
I just wanted to
if you have
slide
any questions.
down. Thank you.
I'd also like to just take a moment and recognize two of my RXR teammates here, Chad Dolgen and Sandra Raymond, who are familiar with the mayor and Ann, but not maybe with the IDA board. And obviously, I call him my partner, Dave Gallo and Matt, because really, as you know, Georgia Green and RXR really have two different focuses at the end of the day. Dave is very good at this workforce housing, which we all recognize, and he's done a great job in Lot G. He's done a great job in New Rochelle with us, and he's going to do a great job on Lot F with us. So I recognize him as a big participant in the Garvey's Point project. From an agenda standpoint, and I promise you, I won't take all night, but I do want to spend a little bit of time on this because I think it's important that you all get some background on where we are, where we were, and where we'd like to end up. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit and give you a quick update on the overall master development, which include blocks H and I, block B, block G, block J, and the master association, which often gets lost in the sauce of the Garvey's Point project. We'll talk a little bit about the site plan from the 2015 first PUD amendment to the 2020 second PUD amendment to what we're actually presenting this evening, which would be a proposed 2023 PUD amendment. And then we'll go through some of the nuances and the connectivity to those agenda items. On page 3, you'll see in highlights the overall master plan as we recognize the overall Garvey's Point plan, 56 acres, half of which is open space. The red highlighted areas are completed projects, buildings H and I, the brewery, the marina, all of the open space, soon to be, which is in yellow, under construction, but soon to be open, block G, which is David and Matt's building, 55 workforce rentals, and then future phases, block E, block A, block F, and block J. So if we turn to page 4, Harbor Landing, as we call it, H and I, being 177 units. I'm sorry, we separated 177 units in building H, which is on the north side of the street on Herb Road, and building I, which is on the south side. Building H was the first to be built, opened in 2019, 177 rental units, where we run right around 97 plus or minus percent leased and occupied. Our current pilot payments are just under $200,000 a year. Our current HOA payments are $368,000 a year. Building I, which opened in 2020, 208 rental units, 98% leased, 98% occupied. Current annual pilot payments, $234,000 a year. Current annual HOA payments, $433,000 a year. In our last reporting, we reported from permanent job creation standpoint, these two buildings have permanent jobs created of 20 in total, and that's our staffing. And we don't count vendors that come in, whether it's the plumbers or the electricians, and we don't count outsourced cleaning people and things like that. So there's a lot more than that.
You should.
We should. But when it came to my attention today, when they put this deck in front of me that I asked for, I said, there's more than 20 jobs, and we should look at that. But I think it's important that this IDA board gets recognition for these things, because at the end of the day, that's what an IDA is about, job creation and economic development. Building B, which is we refer to as the Beacon, which we completed and opened in 2020, 166, you may know it as 167, but we combined one. 166 condo units were about 72% sold. Our current annual pilot payments now, that's not ours pilot payments, that's the people that own there, coupled with my unsold units, are approximately $3.7 million per annum. And the Beacon also pays into the HOA to the tune of $346,000 per year. Same story here, permanent jobs, 16 created from my general manager through my line staff, quarters, et cetera. And there's obviously some outsourcing that goes on. On Block G, David talked a little bit about it for a moment. There's some photographs here on the right side of the page on page 6. The buildings are pretty much completed. He's got some final paving to do. His landscaping is pretty much done. He's doing his fit and finish at the end of the day. The lottery has occurred, from what we understand, over 500 inquiries or 500 people. Gives you a real good taste as to why and the significance of this housing need. So we're excited about that. And we anticipate, and David, you can correct me if I'm wrong, by all means step up, sometime by the end of this month / beginning of June, he'll open one of the buildings, and then shortly after he'll open the second building. Is that fair to say, gentlemen?
That's correct.
So that's going along well. And obviously there'll be a certain amount of job creation there. I can't report on it because I don't know it today. We've all, I hope, have had the opportunity to visit the Garvey's Point Brewery and Restaurant. We don't own that. We own the building, RXR. We don't own the operation, right? That's leased to the Skoropowski family, along with Ben and Mark, the creators of this. I really appreciated the fact that I had so much interest from outside of Glen Cove for this opportunity, this restaurant opportunity, and that Jim Skoropowski, the founder or the money behind this thing, and we all remember him from the Acclaim days, for those of you from around here. He also owns the Crescent Beach Club as well. It was a day in Mayish time, in the height of COVID, and we sat in my conference room, and I said, Jim, I want to do this restaurant deal with you. He said, restaurants are closing every day, Joe. It's COVID, And I said, COVID will go away, right? And we'll be able to figure this thing out. And when you look at these numbers, and they're only coming up on a year in operation in June. They've had over 50,000 patrons have been through the front door. They've sold 105,000 beers. That's across the table. You can't imagine that many, right? They have recently gone to Shea Stadium. So anybody going to Shea Stadium, you'll see Garvey's Point Brew in Shea Stadium. So they're taking their brand to the next level. They have a private event space of over 2,000 people, and they themselves have permanent job creation of over 25 people. And then obviously seasonal, that probably goes up to 50, but we report pretty much on permanent job creation. So again,
that's only 2 beers a person. I think they're underreported.
Yeah. so again, I think that I, for one, am very proud of some of what we've done here, but we could have done it without you all. And I think when I get in front of this board, it's important for me to tell you not the old story, but kind of where things have gotten to. So thank you for listening thus far. On page 8, the Garvey's Point Marina, which is Ann's favorite, which is just kind of an interesting thing at the end of the day. But we've completed that. RXR took responsibility last year for the operations in concert by an approval from this board. We have elected to do it again this year through the same sort of arrangement that we had. We're doing our best to attract as many people as we can. The idea is really to make sure that we allow Glen Cove residents sort of first opportunity, if you would, and we market such that way. I am finding that we have a lot of residents in our residential communities that have a high level of interest. One of the things that we've recently done, Ann and the team and I and Chad, we're putting a kayak launch in, and that, Chad, is coming within the next couple of weeks. So people will be able to register with the city of Glen Cove, get a registration form, a code, and be able to take their paddleboard or their kayak down to the marina and have a proper safe launch that they can go from the marina into the water. And then frankly, I think next year we'll start thinking about additional kayak storage and things like that. You go all familiar all the way at the end of the point at the circle where we built the restrooms and what I call the boat ramp building. We've put a series of kayak storage facilities there. And I know the city has a program, and I think we've filled it up already.
Right.
So that does pretty well. So we're able to get that activity, and that's been working out well. A couple of jobs that have been created. And I'd also say, working with Ann and the team, we have that now finished, the balance of our bulkhead going from the Garvey's Point Marina, or the brewery as we know it, across for the old guys in the room, Dominic Mastriani's property, or Nassau Ready Mix, or IMT. So now the bulkhead is complete all the way through as part of our PIF project, which we work collectively with Ann and the team on. So that's all 100% complete through Parcel J. Lastly, just in mention, I mentioned the Master HOA. The Master HOA is sort of like the kid that is a really good baseball player and doesn't get any credit for the singles, for lack of better words, right? Because the guy who gets the credit is the guy that hits the home runs, right? Takes a lot of singles to get around the bases. And I say that because it's important not only for this IDA board, but for the public in general to recognize the fact that the funding for all of the operations, maintenance, ongoing services, every paper that's picked up, every garbage can that's emptied in from 49 Herville Road to the boat ramp is outsourced by us and managed by us, the Master HOA, over $2.1 million budget for 2023. None of that affects the taxpayers in the city of Glen Cove in the way that this was designed. And you can see here who's paying what, starting from Block A, $715,000. That's for one of my vacant pieces of property, for the services for everything but my vacant piece of property, all the way through down to Block B, $346,000, for a total of $2.1 million a year of maintenance costs that is being funded by the buildings in the project and not costing the taxpayers or the city of Glen Cove any dollars. So I always think it's important that people understand that, because sometimes that gets lost a little bit in the translation. And there again, permanent jobs creation of 7 people.
That can't be right. $2 million, there's only 7 people?
It's the outsourcing stuff that we don't recognize in terms, because it's so hard to do, like for instance, just to talk for a second, we have the jellyfish, right? The jellyfish cleaning.
Yes.
The jellyfish cleaning is $300,000 a year, and we do with the city's jellyfish. That's where stormwater runs through and gets cleaned before it goes out to the sound. That they filters out once a year, yada, yada, yada. Now, they come, there's 20 people that do that, but they're not permanent positions, for lack of a better word. So they're not employees of any of us, right? They're just the company's employees, but how do we count them? Maybe it's something that we'll talk about.
Explore that, because you probably have 7 alone just with jellyfish cleaning.
Right, exactly.
And the more we can take credit for, the better. So we could talk about that. I know Peter's very adept at the reporting, so we'll look at that.
Okay.
And Joe, I think that there's an amount, we're probably coming up upon that time of year, that you also take from the 22 budget now and will put into the IDA account for future capital repairs and maintenance, correct?
May is that time. This is the time right now.
That's that time.
So annually, what we do is we accrue through this budget X dollars based on a report that we have done as to what the long-term repair and replacement is for all of the assets in the parks, et cetera. And Ann and I work together on that. Last year we sent over like 25,000. This year we'll be sending over, I believe, just under 200,000.
Right.
And then every year we'll continue to up that. And the idea is to build a coffer, right? So that 30 years from now, plus or minus, right? We have the money to redo the Esplanade. We have the money to redo railings. We have the money to redo playgrounds, et cetera. So we're very fiduciary, I believe, under Ann's direction, frankly, and credit to her in getting that accomplished. So that continues to go very well. So I know that was I don't know, 10 minutes of your time that I think was worth it. But which brings us to why we're here this evening. So on page 10, I sort of highlight simply the first PUD amendment to the master development plan, which was a resolution that was dated October 6th of 2015. And what that did was that modified the original plan of the master development for the creation of Block F, Block E, Block D, Block J, and Block A. And just to give some color on that, Block F at that time in 2015 anticipated 56 workforce for sale. Block E at that time in 2015 anticipated 101 units at market rent. And Block D anticipated a up to 50,000 square foot commercial office building. Block J anticipated a park area as well as about 10,000 square feet of retail. And Block A anticipated 346 condo units. We came back to you, and I said earlier that I haven't seen you in 2.5 years. We came back to you for a modification of that in 2020. And after almost 2 years of going back and forth with the city and the planning board, there was a resolution that was dated August of 2017, 2022, that modified Block D, E, and F to remove the workforce housing, construct a 172 market rate rental building, and I'll get to the stats, a parking lot of approximately 160 cars. Block J took some of the retail away because we had built the brewery and added more green space, which you could see in the picture. And Block A was divided into 3 unique buildings to actually make a market opportunity, because building 346 units in one building, we didn't feel was going to be successful. That was approved. You all approved me to go to the planning board. I spent 1.5 years or almost 2 with the planning board going through multiple processes. And at that time, we pretty much had resolution that we would move forward. Well, once again, things change, okay? We weren't, and we'll talk through the story, we weren't able to get there at the end of the day, the finality of getting there, if you would, even though we had the planning board approval. And now we're back here this evening with a new look of an amendment to that amendment, going back to, frankly, Block F being 56 workforce for sale, as Dave and Dan Deegan presented earlier. Block E being 101 market rate units, and Block D and the transfer of Block D being a parking lot. And we'll go into a little bit more detail on specifics on that. No change in Block J to what was previously approved, and no change to Block A to which was previously approved, breaking down into 3 buildings. I do want to talk a little bit on page 13 about, because if I'm you, I'm going to ask me, well, Joe, what happened if you got all this approved, like, from then till now, besides the economy and besides sort of pivoting on some things, there were some very important sort of changes in the way we looked at things, but also in the way we were able to get to or not get to certain places. So I talk a little bit more in detail about, on page 13, in that amendment that was previously done, the 172 units, we had a 5,000 square foot restaurant. And on Block D, we had a surface lot of about 160 total spaces. And we had 67 plus or minus spaces that be available for visitors, et cetera. And with that, we also resolved and agreed that we would take the 56 workforce units and we would have up to 5 years to acquire additional parcels. And as we know, there are other parcels down there. There's Garvey's Point, One Garvey's Point, there's the Conica parcel, et cetera. And we would have up to 5 years, and there's an excerpt here, which you can take away from the actual resolution, to find a place for these 56 units. Also, we had put on the table on page 14, further resolution of this, that we would make certain payments to the city of Glen Cove in the form of community benefits payments, which really were upwards of $4.5 million. And we would also have certain pilots to the balance of the units, right? Because we were going from 101 to 172. Well, by the time we got, unfortunately, by the time we got to a place where this could be decided and move forward, and the economics being what they are out there in the marketplace today, the uncertainty of would we be able to acquire something in 5 years and deliver a workforce product. The governor's office saying we need more workforce housing. The fact that we see a need for workforce housing, we basically sat back and pivoted. We said, look, this doesn't make sense to go forward with this plan, even though we've spent the last 2.5 years trying to get it approved and did get it approved. And we should really rethink this and figure out a plan of how this best fits both in this economy that we're in, but in what's really needed in the community, right? So this third PUD amendment on page 15 at the end of the day anticipates on block F, which is at the top of the page here, we would be building 56 workforce for sale housing units, which again is consistent with the initial thought process. And that, as you heard this evening, we will be trading or selling to Dave Gallo and George Green to take on that endeavor. On block E, RXR would be constructing 101 rental units, which is consistent with our previous approvals. We don't own today at the bottom of the page, we, RXR GIP, do not own block D or lower C, as we may call it. We would be taking title to that. And I, Chad, and others on the team have worked very diligently with the EPA and the DEC to get our environmental situation that we have on this particular lot sorted out. And if you look closely at this lot, what we've done is we've built 142 spaces of parking, a 2,500 retail building, which is sit right at the circle. I don't know who's gonna be in that retail building, but I see some sort of food type of operation there with patios around it. It's right adjacent the park, et cetera. So I think we'll do very well with there. And we'll also be taking some of the parking of this lot, 73 spaces for our building E. Some of our building E will be parked in the building. Some of it will be parked outside. We also have on the table which isn't for the IDA, but I think it's important that you all know about it. We also have agreed with the city that we would, upon a non-appealable site plan approval, which is not what we're getting from here, we're only asking you to send us to the planning board, we will pay the city $750,000 upon a non-appealable site plan approval of blocks D, E, and F, which we anticipate based on conversations we've had with Ann, conversations I've had with the planning board, could happen as early as late August, early September, if we get through that process. Further, we have agreed that we will pay, God bless you, we will pay the city $500,000 on the issuance of a non-appealable site plan approval for the first building on block A of the 3 buildings that we're modifying. And then further, we would pay an additional $500,000 upon the issuance of a building permit for the first building on block A. So we have on the table to the city 1.750 of community benefits payments. We still pay our building permit fees, we still pay our pilot fees, we still pay our rec fees. This is just an addition to help the city with some of their recreational programs and some other things that they would be able to use that for. On page 17 is an isometric of David's building. This is the workforce for sale, so not very sexy because it's just in the computer stages right now, although it'll be a great looking building. You'll see on page 18 This is looking with your back to the east, looking from Herb Hill in through the circle. So that corner of that building, basically, this is the 101 rental building. We've actually, I want to point out, from our 172 unit approval, we've taken a whole floor off this building. So you'll notice that this building is only 3 stories. We're allowed to build 5 stories, but because of the small footprint that we have here, we wouldn't be able to manage parking, et cetera. And we didn't want to exceed the original 101. So you'll see we've taken a whole story off of that. So a very unique building at the end of the day, that I think will really resonate in that, on the other side of that circle. On page 19, not to bore you with this, but just to point it out, there will be some minor lot line adjustments that will be required between the lots D, E, and F. My attorney, Peter, and Millen will work on that. But what's most important is that the bottom line is from 2015 to 2023, our total public space has quite honestly increased a bit. And then when it's all balanced out, we've not taken away any of the public space. So look at it in color for a moment. Look at blue on the left, blue on the right, pink, yellow, and yellow. When you compare the blue and the blue, at the end of the day, you have the same acreage. And we also have committed in our plans, which we had years ago, and obviously in this particular plan, we will have a pathway from Dixon to the Garvey's Point Preserve, and all this blue area, which you don't see the pretty landscape plans, have drainage ponds and rain gardens, and then pathways, mulch type pathways that people can walk all the way out and into Garvey's Point Preserve. So that's obviously a commitment that we're making inside of the plan.
Sure, the walkway is between.
Between
F,
F, right.
Between the red
It
and.
goes like up to the museum, right?
Yeah, you'll be able to take a path all the way up, right? So that's sort of what's going on Block D, E, and F. On Block A, as I mentioned earlier, no change. We're just gonna resubmit all of the old documentation, basically going from 1 building of 346 to 3 buildings of 346. And again, no change on Block J. This is the same plan. We were in front of the planning board with it before you in 2020, and then eventually resolved in 2022. So that's what I have in form of a presentation this evening relative to both where we are and where we're going. I don't see this in any way, shape, or form, frankly, as a heavy lift for this board. We're not in asking for any additional pilots. We're not in asking for any additional tax breaks. I mean, we have everything we need in front of us. And I would also remind this board that, you know, the speed in which we're able to get from point A to point B sometimes causes pivot. So as it did over this period of time, we're ready, willing, and able, committed. We signed Dave's contract today relative to the acquisition of F. I was literally on the phone with our bankers this morning, really finalizing the loan for Block E. And as soon as we can get through the planning board, Chad, who's my building partner inside of RXR, and his team are ready to go vertical, and we could be at a groundbreaking before year end, and obviously making these community benefits payments to the city, as well as paying for building permits and things of that nature. Peter, I'll yield to you to add anything.
Sure. Technically, what we are asking this board for is consent to bring an application to the planning board. So under the continuing covenants agreement that was executed in 2016, we are required to get IDA consent to take the next step of the planning board. You are not deciding on the plan. You are just permitting us to go ahead and approach the planning board. Secondly, we are asking for consent for the assignment or the sale of the property to the Georgia Green entity that will develop the workforce for sale housing.
And that is not on your agenda for tonight. That resolution presumably would come up at the next meeting in June. So the thought is to give you this presentation, let you have some time to think about it, If you have any questions, comments, or issues, please reach out to Ann, and we'll get them answered between now and the next meeting. At the next meeting, we'll give you a resolution, if that's what.
If there are any questions now, we're happy to.
Yeah, we're happy to,
Yeah, yeah.
we're happy to answer questions as well.
And also, thank you, Joe and Peter. I also want to introduce Anthony Nash from Capital Market Advisors, who's with us tonight. You might recall, we hired them last year to sort of work with us on, the Garbus Point bonds and Garbus Point in general. So he joined us tonight as well, and we neglected to introduce him earlier, so just wanted to.
Sorry, Anthony. Forget that everybody doesn't know.
Just wanted to introduce him, and this was very well put together.
Thank you.
Good idea.
And it's sometimes Joe's approachable, Anthony, Peter, anybody else that's here. If a question comes up and you didn't think of it today, you can certainly reach out to me, reach out to any one of them. They're very willing to work with us, and they're good partners. So sometimes you go home and you look at this tomorrow and you think it's something that you would have liked to have asked.
I think that, this is definitely going to bring new life to the project. And it's also going to turn around to we all hear the naysayers that, hey, moving a project this big doesn't come overnight. That there's a lot of time, effort, planning, and a lot of cash money put in by arts. That has once again proven, I think, to Glen Cove, that they're here to work with us.
Well, the naysayers are far fewer
Yes.
than they were many years ago.
I agree with that, especially for somebody that is in town. But we can look out the window and see Village Square, got that accomplished, right? I presented all of what's been accomplished at Garbage Point, but I'm actually with you on the little bit of sort of new naysayer that if I had a nickel, Sandra, for every person on social media that says Joe and RXR are giving up on Glen Cove, I'd have a lot of nickels. And that's the furthest thing from the truth. In fact, Joe and RXR continue to, quite frankly, kill themselves to find a way to better Glen Cove. And if I had a dime, I shouldn't say a dime because then I'd have too many dimes. If I had a penny for every merchant in Glen Cove that has said, thank you, Joe, for the new people that you're bringing into this town and for the businesses we're seeing, right? All I'm trying to do is fulfill the dream, right? What's going to be the hardest thing at the end of the day? Let's be honest with each other. The last building at the point. We all know that, right? We all know that. Dividing it, and I've said this 100 times, I said it to you guys in 2020. Here we are in 2023. Dividing it into 3 segments, right? Which we've already approved. There's really not a lot to think about. Is the opportunity for us to go out and do something as opposed to having, really sit there with that vacant land that continues to cost us money. You saw it in the master HOA payment. The pilot, it cost us $1.5 million a year, plus or minus, to sit there with that fenced in area that Ann made me plant trees on, but, because she said, you're gonna, and I did, God bless her. But at the end of the day, we want to advance things and again, I had met with, in a pre-meeting to this, met with Ann, I met with the mayor and others in Millen, and I said, just find a way to move me through a process, because all I want to do is build. And I don't want to find another reason to pivot. And sometimes things that take too long cause you to find a reason to pivot. So
The more you pivot, the more it costs, correct?
on both sides.
Correct.
Yeah.
And again, I would just further emphasize what the mayor said. You all know me. So I'm very approachable. If there's any,
Oh, we know you all right.
if there's,
We know where to find you.
you know where to find me. You find me at the brewery. That's my second office. You can find me there. I'll go there right from here. I'm not gonna waste any time. But I am very approachable. I'm happy to walk through sites, walk through plans. My team's happy to. We just want to keep moving, and we want to go vertical. We want to have more groundbreakings and more ribbon cuttings, and more people invited.
And no one can really answer any questions that you may have as well as Jill can. So, feel free to go to, really very approachable.
Well, thanks for the opportunity to present.
Yes, thank you very much.
Great presentation.
If you need us here again next month, we'll be happy to be here.
Come on,
Okay,
good
thank
evening.
you.
Okay, thank you.
Be careful with the water.
Yep.
Thanks to you.
Thank you, Ed.
Take care, have a great night.
You too.
Yep.
Good luck. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Thank you all, gentlemen.
This is going in the RX office.
See you. All right, I look forward to it. I'm in town the rest of the week.
All right.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks. Good night.
Okay, thanks.
Okay,
Yeah.
Anthony, do you have any follow-up with the board members at this time, based on our SAR's presentation?
None of it's, it's obviously what we've talked about, and I think it's an important step forward in moving the project along.
Okay,
I think we've mentioned before, the current pilot for Block F says otherwise applicable taxes. One thing that they wanted us to do is to fix those taxes. And we said, we're not willing to do that because we probably have to go back to the bondholders, because that amount could end up being higher or lower. So that request is still sort of out there, and when and if we get to talk with the bondholders, that may or may not be part of the discussion. So we've told them no, at least for now, but Dave has made it clear that he would like that to be at least in our minds going forward. And Anthony will help us when we get in front of the bondholders and determine whether or not that's something that, would be attractive to them or they'd be willing to do. In terms of due diligence, they have asked us to commission a real estate tax appraisal report, which we will do is, we wouldn't normally do it because we're not getting any real estate tax benefits, but they've asked us to do it, I think, as part of both their underwriting with the state, these grants, and I think the next step with the Gala would be at least thinking about whether we want to amend the pilot. No, there's no other comment about that.
right, and I know, Jim Capiello, Vince Hartley, you were with us for the last time we did this type of PUD amended referral to the planning board, and as you might recall, while you're not making the land use decisions here, you're referring it to the planning board. However, if there's any issues, and you probably remember that you want to bring to the planning board's attention, or you want to highlight out of their plan, we could always do what we did last time, which is write it into the consent resolution. So just keep that in mind. And you should have a couple weeks to mull this over and think about it, and if you have any questions, reach out. Okay? All right.
And we have to come up with a date for the June meeting, because the June 27th we
So,
can't have.
We were looking at potentially the week of June 12th. Potentially June 13th is out there. We also need to come up with a date between now and then to hold a public hearing for Georgia Green's financial assistance request for the sales tax and mortgage recording tax. Okay?
Between now and then?
Yeah.
That's like, I have to put the ad in like tomorrow.
Well, that's why we need to talk about a public hearing date, I think, first.
Okay.
And then from there, fit in the next meeting. Okay, does anyone have any other questions on Georgia Green, RXR PUD, anything at that time? I will say, I'm very happy to say that we did receive the EPA and DEC approvals finally for Block D, Lee Tungsten Lower C, after almost 7 years, very recently, just this past week, so that was huge positive.
What Ann's referring to is the IDA still owns that parcel because RXR wouldn't take it from us until Ann got all of these approvals. So as part of what's going to happen is we're finally going to be able to offload, if you will, that parcel and give it back to them.
Which, it has been a liability to us, and quite frankly, a liability to the city as well. So that's positive. All right, I will move on now to the executive director's report,
Okay.
if that's all right with the
All over
board.
the place here, right.
All right, now that we've got all the complex stuff out of the way, I'm happy to announce that Arcadia came through today, our Breton Hills project, and they finally got us the sort of jobs backup and sales tax reporting that was due back in February. You might remember we had sent them a letter of, I guess it was potential default. And really, if they hadn't gotten us the materials by today, I was going to recommend with Millen's concurrence that we actually begin a clawback process and put them in default. So I'm happy to report that they did come through today. So hopefully we can put that matter behind us. And as you might recall, that project does not have a pilot. And the sales tax and mortgage recording tax, actually, did we ever end up with mortgage recording tax? So the sales tax is done. So that project really at this point is now closed out. Okay. Moving on to fair housing. As you might recall, fair housing had come to us some time ago to talk about a potential waiver for rebuilding that building, which was 2 units within that one building that burned down on Dixon Street. While we're not ready to bring that to the board tonight, I just want to bring to your attention that Millen and myself and our chairperson has been working on their waiver request. They did submit a letter to us, and we looked at the letter and we said, what we had previously talked about was, we want to see your planned use of the insurance monies if they don't go back into rebuilding the units. We want to see your construction cost estimates for rebuilding the units. We want to see what the tenants want to see repaired, if that insurance money can go towards, maintenance and repair of those units. We want to understand where those folks live currently that used to live in those units, that might be something we still need to get from them. We want to see your financials, we want to see your 2023 budget. So they came through today with a lot of those materials. So when we're ready, we're going to review them, see if there's anything else we need. Then we would potentially have them attend our next IDA meeting, go through the waiver request. But we'll likely circulate those materials sooner rather than later. So if the board members have any questions or any additional requests for that waiver, we get them taken care of.
Like the taxes.
Right, we also need to take a look at the taxes, because if they are not rebuilding those 2 units, we need to take that into consideration. So that's all in our future.
So has the insurance been settled out for those?
Looks
2
like they're gonna
units?
get something like $600,000 in insurance settlements.
So they're deemed to be demolished and taken down, right? Those.
Not necessarily, we would have to provide a waiver for them to do so, because in our sublease with fair housing, it says that they need to maintain the private use facility, as we call it, as is. So if they're only gonna have 53 units instead of 55 or whatever the number is, they would be obligated to do that. And the board's gonna have to come to that determination. I mean, just looking at it very briefly, it looks like their lowest construction cost estimate to rebuild is about the amount of the insurance money. So we need to take a look at all that and see what direction the board wants to go with that property.
I have a neighbor complaining about, looking at burned out building, so. See where this
We need to do something. We either need to rebuild or demolish and then use that money elsewhere. Yep. So those 2 items, what else did we have to update the members? Oh, TDG. So TDG is the movie theater and that associated retail. As you might recall, the owner was convicted of a federal crime. I believe the sentencing was in March. So we need to go ahead and have them divest in that property. To date, they've submitted a request for our consent to divest that property. I believe it's to a trust.
A trust.
And which would be managed by, I believe, the managing partner would be Paul Pasilico.
Correct.
There's some other entities and people sort of, I think, in the org chart. What this comes down to is, hopefully by our next meeting, we need to conduct some background checks on these folks. Paul Pasilico, I believe, is out of the country or out of town, so we'd like to have him here. I do think eventually that property is likely going to change ownership. They might indeed sell off that property to another owner, but we don't know when and if that's going to happen. So in the meantime, we really need to have them divest of that property until they figure things out. So that is likely going to be coming up at our next board meeting as well. And that would be a consent request.
Yep.
Versus any new financial assistance. I will throw out there, while I have the board here, that Georgia Green is getting, their request is for sales tax and mortgage recording tax assistance, not any new pilot. We typically calculate our fee based on their total construction cost. Something we may want to think about doing, we don't need to decide tonight, is do we discount that fee to be applicable to the amount of the sales tax and mortgage recording tax versus the total project cost? We don't have to do that. I mean, quite frankly, we have to be careful about how much we discount these things because we need to run an agency. But something to keep in mind is, do we discount that fee at all when we approve that project? And I think something we've done in the past is take it on the total budget, right, for sales tax and mortgage recording.
But your standard fee is on the entire project. And here, as Ann says, they're getting, a quarter maybe of the financial assistance that a quote typical project would get, which is usually the pilot. So they're asking for far less than that. They would argue, it's all workforce housing, it's a very tight budget. They're relying on the state to give them assistance. So we predict that they will come back and ask for a reduced fee. I don't have a number or recommendation for you,
Right.
but we're sort of flagging that issue that when they come back, maybe in June, there may be that request, and before we bring it to you, we have to, I think, sort of figure out what the justification is for whatever the number is, and you'll make your decision.
And we do need to collect a fee that's in line with, obviously our administration as well. So we're not saying that we waive their fees, but we may take a look at something we've done in the past, which is if they're just receiving sales tax and mortgage recording tax, perhaps we take,
Which we did for Block G.
I believe we did that for
I'm
Block
ready
G.
to see what the fee was for that.
I believe we did that for Block G.
Mhm.
So we can discuss that further, but that's something to just keep in mind while we're all together. What else do we have for my executive director report? Did I cover all the outstanding business?
I think so. Fair housing was late, or they owed some real estate taxes, right?
Correct.
Which
So,
they've now brought current.
so just to, I guess, recap.
A lot of things came current this week.
Oh, no, they all came current. Millen and I were joking, is it a full moon? Because they all
Was
came
it
current
this meeting
within
today?
like an hour. Millen and I spoke on the phone and suddenly things within the next hour. So they were in actually tax arrears of $12,000 going back many years ago. There was a payment plan established with the city when their first pilot, well, I shouldn't say their first pilot, but the last pilot agreement that we had in place took effect, 2013, in that time frame, 2014. So I'm happy to report that their real estate tax arrears are now complete. There's no more tax arrears. Livingston paid off their tax arrears, which were significant. It's almost a full year's worth of outstanding taxes. So that is now all current. PR storage. So we still have this issue of PR storage and outstanding real estate taxes and associated fees and interest. There's the idea that we're potentially going to settle with the prior owner, Men on the Move, for the original pilot payment, but then hold PR storage accountable for the fees and interest that accumulated. Millen has been working with them on a settlement. I still have pilot termination documents that haven't been signed, and this really needs to come to a close. Millen, do you have any updates on any of this?
I emailed with John Farrell a week ago, and he said, yeah, I think that we've agreed on a settlement. I said, okay, is this the amount, or is that the amount? We're about $5,000 apart. He wasn't sure, was going to go back. So the bottom line is that they are, I think, stalling, because it's been over a year, probably a couple years maybe.
Right.
We are not going to sign the termination documents. It means the IDA is still, in the chain of title until we resolve this. So, unfortunately, it's the same story I've been telling you most months that we've been dealing with it, which is that I'm going to keep following up with John Farrell and try to get it resolved.
Well, Millen, at what point, though, do we need to take further action? Because this really has been going on a long time, and I don't like having an outstanding pilot that we haven't sign the termination documents.
I'd rather give legal advice, not in an open session, so,
Okay.
you know, you're right, there will come a point, and we can discuss what the legal options are. And, you know, maybe we do that in executive session next time, but I agree, there's a finite limit to how long we should let this go on.
Could we ask them to potentially come to our next meeting to address this? And could we put this up for resolution? Can we just definitively say to them, we want to put this up for resolution at our next meeting, be done with it? You know,
Aren't
Really,
the
that's,
aren't
you
the
know,
partners
it's a
in
bordering on
Georgia?
things, because now that's a public meeting. You wanna bring things up?
Yeah, let me reach out to John Barrel
Okay.
and see if I can do that. I'm also thinking, you know, if I can barely get him to return my phone calls, I'm not sure that his client is likely to show up.
And they're not local, right? They're like in Georgia.
They're where?
Georgia? That's where I send the request for financial reporting every year.
well, they used to have local folks involved, but I don't know. All right, I guess we do have to bring this to a close though, and we're now in 2023.
Yep.
And this has been going on now over a year and a half nearly, since the termination of the pilot, so. I also get asked quite frequently by our city finance department when and if we're gonna see this settlement payment, so. Okay,
Is that it? Is that it?
I think so. Does anyone have any other
Anyone have
questions?
Any questions for Ann? Ann is a fountain of information, so we thank you. So if there is no further business, I make a motion to adjourn the meeting and I ask for a second.
Second.
Motion seconded by Vince Hartley. Will the secretary please poll the board?
Dave Jimenez.
Aye.
John Fielding.
Aye.
Grady Farnan.
Aye.
Jim Capiello.
Aye.
Vice Chair Hartley.
Aye.
Chairperson Panzerbeck.
I vote aye. Motion carried and the meeting is adjourned at 6:48. That was not bad. We covered a lot of territory.
That's why we wanted to meet a little earlier, because we, you know, there's a lot to cover, 3 different representations.
I know where to reach you.